Now I want to go back to the Iraq then versus now.
Yeah.
So I feel like Schwarzkopf was MacArthur, and I'm not sure who was Truman. I don't know if it was Bush Senior or, well, actually, I guess at that point it had just become Clinton because 90 was the November of 90 was the election. January 20th would have been inauguration. So it is like right there at the edge. But anyway,
Yeah.
so I don't know if it was Powell or the White House, whomever was there. But I know Schwarzkopf wanted to go into all the way to the capital of Iraq.
Hmm.
He didn't. He didn't. He wanted to go to Baghdad. He did not want to stop. He wanted to take Knucklehead out of power. And I kind of feel like that would have been. I don't like what we did with Afghanistan and Iraq at the same
Hmm.
time. I felt it was too much destabilization. I felt at that point we needed to focus on Afghanistan. We knew what we had in Iraq. We could isolate it, no big deal. However, I feel like had we allowed Schwarzkopf to do what he wanted, maybe take him out of power in Baghdad, then the rest of the region was very stable, and I think you probably could have had a much more stable form of government in there that would have been much more U.S. friendly without everything else, all the other distractors going on. You didn't have Syria going on. You don't have Yemen. You didn't have Afghanistan. You didn't have any of that nonsense. So I feel like that would have been the right time to take care of Iraq. And then who knows? Does 9/11 actually happen at that point or not? I don't know. But I mean, what are your thoughts? You said you did some international studies.
Yeah, I think regardless of what we did in the Middle East, A9 A9/11 was bound to happen. Um, I think to speak to your thoughts on if we had gone all the way, if we had finished the job the first time in Iraq, I believe you're alluding
Yeah.
to.
Yes.
I think in the region at the time there were multiple hot spots. They weren't just as well known. They were the initial stages, like Yemen and Somalia. The entire Middle East was not stable. I don't think that's the word to describe it. But I feel like if we had done what we did in the second Iraq War, we would have had the same results. Where, because in a lot of these international situations, you anytime you eliminate the government, the standing government, you're going to get what's called a power vacuum, and people are going to try and take control. Outsiders are going to try and take control. We saw in the most recent Gulf War with the insurgents just trying to come in. The reason for that is because of the borders there that were drawn all those years ago. You have a certain religious sect that occupies territory across two different countries. You have another religious sect that occupies territory in a different, in a different country, and those two religious sects also reside in the same country. So you're bound to just constantly have problems with unstable, if governments are unstable over there. If they're not stable governments, you're always going to have insurgents. So as much of a madman as Saddam Hussein was, keeping him in power without a replacement, basically, how I feel, staved off what happened in the most recent Iraq War. We would have had that same thing happen in the 90s instead of in the 2000s, because we still had governments that were supporting extremism and terrorism at that time, and they would have still done the same thing, I believe. So by not going full force in the initial Gulf War, I think we just kind of staved off the inevitable. I think what happened in the most recent Gulf War was going to be inevitable. It was going to turn into a mess. We could have done that differently. We could have gone in and assassinated Uday, Qusay, and Saddam, and then seen what happens. But unless you have a government ready to install, there's always going to be a power vacuum. There's always going to be the outside influences coming in.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. But I think the difference is, at the time, the whole region was so up in arms against Iraq for what they did to Kuwait that you had that support you needed. And I feel like, look, I'm no fan of Saudi Arabia. I'm not saying that they are our ally per se, but they were a big part of that coalition. And I feel like they would have filled a lot of that vacuum, and we would not have had to have hung around the way we did this time, because we didn't have the support this time that we had then. And Kuwait, the government of Kuwait, the government of Saudi Arabia, those other countries, I feel like they would have filled that vacuum, which would have allowed us. Because look, that's the big thing at the time. The optic was they wanted Kuwait soldiers going in. They wanted Saudi soldiers being right up front. They wanted all of that, showing that these were Middle Eastern countries somewhat policing themselves with the support of the rest of the world. And I feel like they would have filled that vacuum. And later, and again, I agree that at some point there still would have been a 9/11. Who knows if it would have been 2001? Maybe it was 2005. But at that point, you just have that one. Hopefully, you just have that one issue to deal with. But that's where I obviously hindsight's 2020.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I always look back, going, I wonder how that would have changed things.
I think the key player, you mentioned Saudi Arabia. I'm going to mention Iran. The key player here, the wild card in that region has always been Iran. If Saudi Arabia, establishes dominance in the region by filling that power vacuum, Iran feels threatened and now needs to act accordingly. So there's always going to be some instability in that region until they redraw the lines, until they redraw the borders. Which will never happen.
Yes, I mean, Iran was already. They've always been a big player in the terrorism game. But remember too, now they just got out of a war with Iraq, and they took, neither one of them won. They both took a beating. So I don't think Iran physically was in a position to threaten anybody else. That's where I think that the government of Iraq could have been stabilized a little bit more without Hussein in power, and we wouldn't have had to have hung around. But yeah, Iran is always going to be a thorn in our side until we definitively do something to shut them up.
They fund everything. They fund all of the terrorist groups in the region. So
yes, they do. So I can't believe Biden's letting them sell oil. Ridiculous.
So oil. We didn't we give them? Wasn't there something during the Obama administration? We gave them a few $1 billion. just gave them some of our paychecks.
Yeah, just put them on cargo planes and flew it over. That was nice.
Yeah.
Oh, it was their money anyway. No, it isn't. They still look. They will forever owe us for the Beirut bombing. So as far as I'm concerned, that debt will never be paid in full unless certain things happen.
Yeah.
All right.
That re-
So you got out in 2000, and then it seems like you've had quite the adventure since you got out.
it's been a whirlwind, that's for sure.
Now, what was the of all those things you listed? Like when you got out, did you have anything lined up? Or you're like, I'm done with I enjoyed my time in the Marines, but I'm done. I'm getting out. Did you have anything lined up, or were you just playing it by ear?
I was my main goal was to get back into college and finish those last 2 years. Um, I so I did that, but I didn't finish. I ended up having to drop out because I couldn't afford college. I was under the pre 9/11 GI Bill, and after putting $100 a month of my paycheck for 4 years into that GI Bill, I was only able to get out $175 a quarter, and that was supposed to,
Wow.
yeah, that was supposed to pay for my $4,000 tuition and my $300 in books and my 175 in parking, and so I dropped out because I couldn't afford it. That's when I ended up for about 8 years or so working on films, doing the bodyguarding and doing the firearms instruction for a little bit longer until I could, until I thought I'd saved up enough money to come back to school. So I went back to school, and tuition had increased a couple more thousand a quarter. So I eventually started taking out loans and stuff, finished the degree, and went directly into my master's and finished off there.
All right. So
That was
how did you get into firearms instruction, bodyguarding, and movie advising?
so. I think it started with firearms instruction. I worked out at Front Sight as an instructor in Front Sight, Nevada,
Okay.
and I was an instructor and or range master in everything they have out there, including the ropes and rappel tower. I redeveloped their precision rifle course. Um, and that is where I was tasked with training an actor that was going to be playing a Marine Scout sniper in a film. That's the only information I got. Hey, can you come out this weekend and train an actor for a movie? Um, so I put together a little 3-day boot camp for, it ended up being Mark Wahlberg, the producers, and the director Antoine Fuqua came out, and um, just put him through the ringer for 3 days, and they were pretty impressed with what I was able to do. So they invited me on as a technical advisor on the film Shooter, and I spent about a year and a half working on that, pre-production, location scouts, um, principal photography. We filmed in Canada, Philly, DC, Baltimore, LA, and then a little bit in post-production as well.
Wow.
And yeah, and then having been in the in the film industry at that point, I was in LA and was referred to people as a bodyguard or a personal trainer or somebody that could train you up for your film where you're going to be shooting some guns. And at the time, my dad and his SWAT buddy, they were former SWAT guys at San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's up here, had started an executive protection company. So I helped them kind of put that company together, and we had a few clients doing the VIP protection. And then since I had my guard card, I offered my services in Hollywood and started working basically self-employed as a bodyguard while trying to find more work on films, while also working as a firearms instructor for a place called Defensive Firearms Training. One of the instructors at Front Sight and I well, not and I, he went on to form a new company called Defensive Firearms Training. And this might be a name that you might be familiar with. Do you know who Rudy or Rudolph Waldinger is? He was a international revolver competition shooter. Austrian American. Okay. I think he placed second or won the international revolver competition one year. He was an instructor out at Front Sight. He started defensive firearms training. So for the next 10 years or so, I worked for him as his precision rifle instructor, and I taught a few other courses as well, on and off site, while I was searching for more work in the film industry and working as executive protection.
Now, did that work with Mark Wahlberg? Did that lead to any other movies? Any more advising?
Not directly through him or the director, which I thought would happen, but through some connections I made and friends that I eventually made, I got to work on, the original Sniper film with Tom Berenger is like a 10 movie series now. I think that I think they're working on the 10th one now. I worked on the 5th installment, which I think during filming was called Ghost Shooter and is now called Legacy, and so I got to work with the iconic Tom Berenger on the iconic Sniper film. That was really cool. I had just happened to make friends with Tom Berenger through somebody I met on the set of Shooter, and am still friends with my friend David, and he's good buddies with Tom Berenger. Well, Tom got asked to do another Sniper film and said, mentioned to the producers, I don't want to do it unless there's a military advisor involved, because there always seems to be something wrong, something not authentic or legitimate or whatever. And so he thought it'd be a good idea to bring me on, and that was excellent. That was we filmed in Greece, we filmed in Bulgaria. That was a fun project to work on. But no, nothing ever resulted from working on Shooter. Just connections of connections. It's not what you know, it's who you know in that industry.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
yeah.
That's why I thought maybe it would lead to more with, I mean, those are pretty big names. So,
During that time, after I had such an awesome experience working on Shooter, the first time where I had felt like I had been able to showcase all of my skills as a scout sniper in a positive way, and I wanted to share that feeling with, other service members transitioning out of the military. So my dream at that point was to start an agency to place recently transitioned veterans into the film industry, whether it be as security or background actors or military technical advisors or even actors. But right at that time, the writers went on strike. And then after that, the actors went on strike. And then after that, the economy went through the floor.
went on strike.
And I'm this one person, new person in this small niche in a small industry. And just after 3 years of spinning those wheels, I decided to just cut loose and get back to school. And that's when I eventually ended up finishing my bachelor's degree. I thought I'd saved up enough money at that point to go back to school, but that was not the case. So I took out loans. That was a wild, decade and a half there of very strange experiences.
Fun, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was fun. It was definitely an adventure.
Now, yeah, and it is Sniper Legacy.
Legacy,
So,
okay. Yeah. I have a
yeah.
T-shirt that says Ghost Shooter, and from when we were in Santorini. So I guess they changed the name on that. I was kind of upset about that one. If I may just real quickly here, it's very tough working on those as a technical advisor, because you're trying to get some authenticity to add some validity to the character, and everything looks like it's going great during filming, and then in post production they don't bring you back for editing. And when you this is I'm going to break down why there are such huge mistakes in some military films. Um, the actors, will film a scene. Maybe they have a line or two with the supporting actor. They're going to film that line or two from 5 different angles, give 5 different takes from all those 5 different angles. So you've spit out the same scene, same 2 lines, at least 30 times before you move on to the next scene, the next whatever. And during those 25, 30 takes, the actor's going to make some mistakes. Maybe they had their finger on the trigger when they shouldn't have. Maybe they didn't have their finger on the trigger when they should have. Well, my job is to jump on set in between takes and be like, okay, you had your finger on the trigger in this scene. You should have your finger not on the trigger. Or you did it this way, you should do it that way next. And then the rest of the takes, they do it like that. Maybe they make another mistake on something else later on. You correct them on that, and then they do it right. Well, the director, when they're making the final cut, has all these 30 takes to make a choice from of what he wants to insert into that scene. And he's taking into consideration the lighting, the focus of the camera, the fact that the actor didn't mess up their lines, and not taking into consideration whether it was a mistake that the military advisor had to correct. So at the beginning of, this is great, at the beginning of Sniper Legacy, there's a sniper and observer setup scene where all hell is breaking loose. I'm actually in the scene. I get shot, and I had to do my own stunts. It was really cool. But in the final cut, the sniper looks over at the observer and says, "Range me," and the female observer looks at her wind gauge and gives him the range. And then he says, "What's the wind?" And she looks through the spotting scope and gives him a wind call. She did that on the first take. And I explained to her, look, when he says range, look through the scope. When he says wind, look at your wind gauge, or do something like that or whatever. And she did the rest of the takes correctly. But because the director was a dingbat, didn't have me back to look at the final edit, he put that take in the scene because it had good lighting or good whatever. And so now there's this female Marine Scout sniper observer that's looking at the wind gauge, giving a range correction, and looking at the spotting scope, giving a wind call. And I'm just like, this is ridiculous. So it doesn't matter how hard you work on these films, unless you have full control over what goes to final cut, there's going to be mistakes like that.
That's actually
So
a
frustrating.
very good. Yeah, that's a very good insight though, because at least now I feel a little better. No, okay, so I don't watch that brand of movies because
Yeah.
of the errors that are in them. But it's actually nice hearing that, on the back end, there was an attempt to get it right. It just didn't make the final cut. Now here's something
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah.
So it looks like Sniper 5 is called Legacy. Sniper 6 is called Ghost Shooter.
They must have done something with the titles there, because I have a T-shirt that says Ghost Shooter Santorini with the logo. And then, yeah, right before it released, I remember Sniper Legacy. I have the DVD, but that's weird. They must have, sometimes there's something going on in the real world at the time that's going to cause them to make a decision like that. Maybe there was like a shooting situation in real life, and they didn't feel comfortable with the title of the movie being Ghost Shooter at that time, but later on did.
Right.
That's the only thing I can explain for that.
Huh. Yeah, it's possible. So who knows? But yeah, it looks
Great
like
group of actors.
Okay. How was it
Yeah.
working with Tom Berenger?
So he had a very limited role in the movie. It was funny. He is a military historian. He even schooled me up on some World War I battles over a beer or two one night. He comes on set after we've been filming for a while, and Don Michael Paul is the director. He has all these young actors, and for some reason he wants them running everywhere. He always wants them running across the scene. They've got these big long guns and big packs and drag bags, and he wants them sprinting through the scene. And and I'm always getting asked, how would a scout sniper do this? And I'm like, well, they wouldn't be running. They wouldn't be sprinting through the scene. It's like, well, we gotta make it intense. So I'm gonna have them run. Okay, we'll have them run. So we've got all these actors running through a scene, carrying these big long guns, tripping and falling and stuff. And I'm like, well, this is why we don't run unless you really, really have to. Tom Berenger comes on set, and Don Michael Paul goes, okay, we want you're chasing this sniper here, who actually turns out to be his character's son, and he finds out, you're chasing this sniper here, and you got to run through these bushes and stuff. And Tom Berenger looks at him, after I've been saying this for months, looks at him and says, why am I running with this long gun? Like, we don't do... Scout snipers don't, run sprinting with their long guns for no reason. We stalk. And so Tom Berenger got his way. He's the only actor in the film that walks through his scene. Everybody else is running with these big old guns, and he's the only one that's just stalking stealthily through his scene. So it was a lot of fun, after filming or after set, sharing a beer with him after set was always the fun part of Tom Berenger, because we got into some good conversations. But the rest of the actors, they it was a young group of kids, quite a few Brits, and Chad Michael Collins is the lead actor, and he takes over the franchise from Tom Berenger. He's he's that character, Thomas Beck, I think, he's Thomas Beck's son, and goes on and carries the storyline. Billy Zane's in that one too. Billy Zane makes a couple appearances in some of these movies too. He's in a few. I know he was in the original, and then he was in the third one or something, and then he comes back and makes another appearance in the sixth one, I believe. So it's quite the franchise.
Yeah, and it does look like there's going to be a 10th one. So
yeah, number 10. Keep it going.
Oh my goodness. So what do you do after all that? You get your degree. Now you said a financial, I'm not even going to try again.
Yeah, close enough. Compliance officer in the investment banking industry. Yeah. I was while I was putting myself through school, I was working as a personal trainer, and someone in one of my classes, her husband was a compliance officer for a couple broker dealers in Kansas City, and needed some assistance. And she thought, with my attention to detail, I might be a good fit. And he eventually thought I might be a good fit, not just to assist him, but to become a compliance officer. So I took all of the investment banking industry exams, like the securities individual exam, the securities essentials exam, whatever that was called, the Series 79, the Series 63, the Series 24, and then ended up getting hired as a compliance officer and working as a cybersecurity professional for these broker dealers, because my master's was in national security studies. My focus was in cybersecurity. So I finally put one of my degrees to good use.
It seems like a whole bunch of computer time and office time. It seems like a far cry from your beginnings.
It's such a different life I'm living right now, that not outside of, away from the laptop. I'm pretty much the same, but it's very weird. All my life I've been outdoors, doing pretty adventurous stuff for work, and now here I am staring at a laptop screen inside all day. So it's been a bit of a change, but it's very interesting work. I'm enjoying it, and it's real challenging. And Yeah, everybody I tell that to who knows my background, they just kind of go, "You're what? You're doing what?"
Yeah.
No background in accounting or economics or anything like that. But as most people that have our backgrounds, in a specialized unit in the military, it takes kind of certain kind of person to be in that type of unit and go through that grueling process and not give up. And I think you'll find that a lot of people like that have had similar experiences like that can find enjoyment in doing pretty much anything. I could have gone the route of becoming a competition shooter and going into law enforcement and being a police officer, and it could have gone any of those routes. But here we are, as a compliance officer in the investment banking industry. Nowhere near my wheelhouse whatsoever, but am able to put on my camouflage and blend right in. Uh, so I attribute those skills to the skills I learned in those schools I was in the military, specifically Marine Scout Sniper School. That those types of schools prepare you for what a lot of the extremes that you might encounter in life, and that certainly helped me jump industries here and be flourishing in an industry that I had no business being in to begin with. You know, so it's a bummer that those types of schools, those types of instructors are going by the wayside, because they do teach valuable lessons.
Yeah, they really do. There's a lot of leadership being lost there.
Yes.
So, do you see yourself doing anything ever again in the long gun or short gun realm?
If anybody wants to sponsor me, I'll jump into some competitions. Just in my what I do is I stay proficient with my self defense weapon systems, and I keep up on my skills, the rappelling, the shooting, staying in shape. I would love to get into long gun competition shooting, but the optics, the gun, the ammo, it's a lot of money that I feel could be spent better elsewhere. If anybody would be interested in sponsoring me, I know the exact route to go, and what to do, and all the questions to ask and who to ask them, and I'd probably be a fairly decent competitor. But I'm not looking to jump into something like that without any type of sponsorship.
Yeah. Do you know Phil Vallejo?
I met him when we did our 20-year reunion a few years ago, down at Pendleton. He showed us around the armory. Um, I didn't get to have any like personal conversations with him, but great guys down there. I mean,
Eh,
those guys, very mature, very young and very mature gentlemen there. Was very impressed.
Well, and he got a start just like you did. He was at ITS. I don't know if it was SOI at that time or what, but same thing. He got lucky and was able to take the NDOC
Oh,
right out
wow.
of ITS. Like it was really weird because his story almost parallels yours, but years later, like they did it again.
Yeah.
Um, but when the reason I bring him up is when he got out, he took a sizable loan in order to buy all this equipment to get into competition and the
Hmm.
training game. It eventually paid off, but it was a sizable risk. I don't want to give the amount because I could be wrong, but he said it in one of his podcast episodes. That's how I
Yeah.
know. I was like, holy cow. So
That's what's prevented me, because I mean, I can estimate what that number is, and that's just not something I'm going for. And for you're getting recognition, and it's your sport. I understand, and it is for some people. It's just not on my list of priorities. I did the crew serve weapons scout sniper competition when I was in, and we did really well at that. And I got into a local competition at the Hogue Action Range up here with my shotgun because I wanted to see how proficient I was shooting lefty with that. But those are fun, but I just don't see the reward other than hearing that ting at 1,000 yards or further, which I do miss. But I think I could go hear that ting for much cheaper than becoming a competition shooter.
Yeah. Now
All,
you were.
all respect to those guys, though.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, Now you mentioned that you upkeep your use of your defensive guns, but it seems like to me that's getting harder and harder in California. Yes?
Yes. Yeah, I usually, if I want to make sure, if I want to make sure my long gun's held at 0 and everything, or keep up on my skills, I usually have to go to somebody's property. There's um, not very many ranges near me that are of 1,000 yards or anything that I'd like to play on, and the ones that are, your movement is very regulated. You can't just show up and shoot, set up some unknown distance targets. It's, usually a range that I wouldn't approve of. Having been an instructor on ranges for so many years, these are ranges that the only thing I can think of when I'm at them is how I would make them better, but I understand it's just different in California. And that goes for all the indoor ranges here as well. The things that I like to do with handguns, they don't allow you to do at indoor ranges. I like to do some ambidextrous stuff, running while shooting, shooting from awkward positions, practicing malfunction clearances while on the run, and then re-engaging the target, weapons transitions from righty to lefty, shotgun to handgun. They don't let you do that stuff at these ranges. So I usually have to wait till it's not fire season out here, go find some spot way out in the middle of nowhere, set up some clay pigeons and some pallets, and go practice all my stuff that they don't let you do. Like if I go shooting with friends, I get a lot of weird looks. There was clay pigeon is something I've never got into. I don't understand. It's very easy. I don't understand how people miss. I show up with a handgun and wait till somebody misses, and then draw and shoot their clay with the handgun, and then shoot one of the two pieces that it breaks into, and then holster before it hits the ground, and people look at me funny, like, how did you, and we just thousands and thousands and thousands of rounds, but they don't, you can't. So most people don't invite me to go shooting in California. Most of my California people don't invite me to go shooting. I'm sure there's people elsewhere that would love me to come shooting with them.
How far are you from front sight?
So that was a 7-hour drive for a normal person. Yeah, it usually took me about 5. You're going through the middle of the desert, go as fast as you want.
Were you aware it sold?
Is that recent?
Yeah, very recent.
Okay, I was not aware of that. I left there on not good terms. A lot of the instructors were not getting their paychecks for months at a time, and multiple lawsuits on the original owner because he had some fraudulent activities with some of the investors' monies. And yeah, I left because I hadn't gotten a paycheck the entire time I was working on Shooter. They had worked as my agent, and when Paramount Pictures, after I did the 3-day boot camp at Front Sight, Paramount Pictures called Front Sight to acquire me as a technical advisor, and Front Sight acted as my agent, and then called me up and said, hey, you have this opportunity. You want to go work on this movie? They're offering this amount, and I said, all right. And I never received a paycheck from then on from Front Sight. So the production company was sending Front Sight the money for me, and then Front Sight was not paying me. So I was living in Canada for the whole year, working in Vancouver and on that film, were living off of the per diem that luckily we had negotiated. I was getting like, I don't know, $60 a day or something for meals. So I was living off of the per diem, and the production company was nice enough to pay me as a costume designer because I made all the ghillie suits. So I made a little extra money on the side there, but came back to America after working on that film. You know, where are my paychecks? You guys haven't paid me in like 6 months. And, uh, just got the run around, and eventually after, you know, I was still teaching classes there. I was teaching for another couple months before I just, you know, found out from a lot of the other instructors that they weren't receiving their paychecks either. And I was just, time to get out of here.
Wow.
You know, yeah,
Well,
it was
well, so you
very
know,
unfortunate.
it actually went into bankruptcy
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
was purchased out of bankruptcy. So, but did you also know that Barrett was sold?
Oh, really? No, I didn't know that.
I didn't know either till I got back from SHOT Show. But apparently, while I was at SHOT Show, I want to say the day I met Ronnie was the day it was finalized, and some Australian company bought them.
What?
Yeah, man. I was like,
Oh,
whoa, that's like blasphemy.
yeah, that's, oh man.
I had no idea.
Wow.
Now, you ever go to, do you know who Taryn Butler is?
Yes, yes. Terran Tactical down in, he
Yeah.
trains actors as well.
Yeah. I didn't know if maybe you'd ever been down to his range.
I have not met him. Um, I did try to get on that show that he was on quite a few times, Top Shot, but
Mm.
um, every time I went down for an interview, I never made it beyond the interview part.
Oh,
I don't know
wow.
what. I mean, I don't know. I sent in my video. It was like 5 years in a row, and I kept going down there and doing, and I kept yelling at the screen during every season too. Why are people missing their target? I don't understand why people are missing their targets. It's called Top Shot. It was very frustrating to not get on that show and watch how people would compete on that show. But he did really well. I think he did really well. And, I don't think he was training. Was he training actors prior to being on Top Shot? I
I
think that's what
don't
made him famous.
know. I think so too, but I don't know.
Well, as
Um,
a competition shooter, he gained some fame, but then he eventually went on Top Shot, and then I think he opened up Turan Tactical and started training actors and stuff.
right. And that's where his name's really exploded.
Hmm.
So, because I mean, now you've had Keanu and
Yeah,
others there from the John Wick series of movies, The Train, and so yeah, it's kind of exploded.
it's wild. The my mentor at defensive firearms training, Rudy Waldinger. You know, I could go into his background, but it's amazing. He was the bodyguard that the movie Bodyguard was made about. Like he was Nancy Reagan's bodyguard. He worked for the State Department. He was Austrian Special Forces. He was crazy. He was awesome. But he developed a shooting system called close quarters high speed shooting. And this was back in the early 2000s, and trained me up on it. And we started teaching foreign special forces, American special operations units, CHP, California SWAT, and Nevada SWAT teams up on this close quarters high speed shooting system. And
Hmm.
lo and behold, John Wick 1 comes out, and we see our techniques being used in the film. Not our techniques that Rudy developed that had eventually made it nationwide and become so popular that Turan Butler was using them at his school to train actors on films. And you know, some of these techniques were just blatantly obvious that they had come from Rudy. I mean, to me, they were blatantly obvious that these were Rudy's techniques. Nobody was doing these techniques prior to you know, Rudy, and it was really cool seeing that.
Wow, that is pretty cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
he was the first person that really pounded into not using your sights at close quarters. You know,
Mm.
that it was always speed and accuracy, and distance was the culprit there. You know, you could be you could be faster. You needed to be faster if the distance was less. You needed to be more. You had the time to be more accurate if the distance was greater. And so he was the first person I've seen really get into close quarters high speed shooting without using your sights. Uh, and that's what you see John Wick doing throughout the movie. You know, back in the day, they used to teach us, you know, as you're drawing, you could actually shoot from the hip if you were pointed in properly. Well, there's a whole nother level to that if you're talking about close quarters shooting. Anyways, I don't know why I went off on that tangent.
No, that's all right though. That's a good tangent because that was I was trained under that 4-step process back in the early '90s. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
so on step 2, you should
You're
be
pointed.
level. Yep, and you should be able to start shooting. So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely different. Well, Patrick, I appreciate the time, man. This has been a fun conversation.
Yeah, I enjoyed talking with you as well.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back on and talk some more old school stuff.
I'd love that.
Awesome. Well, you have a great day and don't let the rain get you down.
All right, David. Thanks. You too. And thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being on.
All right. Take care.
Until next time.
Don't be a little bitch.
Yeah.